Yeah, so let me share with you my philosophy for how I'm building the business and why. So I'm building my business at the root of LinkedIn. Why? Because it's my POV that when you look at all the social platforms in the world, it's the last one that's not owned by one human.
Yeah.
So there's some comfort in that, even though it's ran by a board and it's ran by Microsoft. It's not owned by Elon. It's not owned by Zuck. It's not just like one human that has that has the ability to have the control. Maybe it's a control thing for me, but that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's interesting to me, John, is that it's probably for the most part the most validated platform that I know that John Brink's a human being and you have a wallet.
Hello, I'm John Brink and podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people that wonder, is saying, I know where Canada is and I know where British Columbia is. Where is Prince George? Well, we're about 500 miles north of Vancouver. And that puts us in the middle of British Columbia, a beautiful, beautiful area. And today, a very, very special guest. His name is Keith Bilous, and he is an entrepreneur extraordinaire, and sometimes not so much either, in sometimes falling down and trying to go through the things that we go through as entrepreneurs trying to build businesses. So what happened to Keith, and we'll talk about that a lot, in a blink, in a heartbeat, and in the span of one phone call, and I read that from his outline, that's how fast life changes. Keith is saying, in February 2021, I got a phone call. The company I had built from nothing and nurtured to success was headed in their new direction, and I wasn't invited. We're going this way, they said, and you're not going that way. 10 years earlier, I had sold the company and stayed on as the CEO. Now, everything I had worked for, everything I had been, was taken away just like that. Over a fucking phone call. Over one fucking phone call. It was awful, but that's the things about true growth. It never comes easy. This is also what happens to entrepreneurship that rise to that a special extraordinaire, where all of a sudden, as we all go through all the things that we were working on, spend all that time and effort, falls down. It then becomes a question, can you stand up, dust yourself off, and go forward again and again and again? Keith is one of those examples. What followed was 22 months of questioning your self-reflection, self-discovery, finding new love, making an identity shift, finding new purpose. My next. What was my next, Keith? What happened then? After all this stuff happened to you, and you stood up again and was reflecting and doing all those things that you did, what was next?
Oh, John, it's interesting when you write that piece and then somebody reads it back to you, how you hear it in your ears, you hear the story. What was next for Keith Bilous? Well, what was next was I became a pretty damn good Uber driver for my kids.
Yeah.
I spent some time in the garden, and then I took my kids to Kenya, John. And when I came back from Kenya, I said to the kids, I said to my wife, rolled my sleeves up, and the old proverbial, Dad's going back to work because Dad feels like he has to contribute to society again. Yeah. Dad has things to do. Dad has ideas to express and things to say. And John, I didn't know what the hell any of that meant. I just know that I had to get up and go.
Yeah.
So I became the CEO of my own interests. I went and just became a proverbial expert in things that interested me and started exploring and became curious, John. And I allowed myself to be curious and allowed myself to begin my journey back to where I am today in front of you. Because, man, a long time ago when I started that previous company, and man, it was a long time ago when I got that phone call when my life changed. And man, it was a long time ago from those 22 months.
But everything changed for you. And would I be correct in assuming that what happened was devastating, but it laid the foundation of what happened next?
Oh, man, John, you're so right. Sometimes I believe others have to make, in hindsight, what becomes the best decisions for us sometimes.
Exactly.
And I perhaps wasn't able to make the decision that inevitably had to come, which was the company I founded needed a new voice, needed some new leadership. We're going in a different direction. And yeah, at the time when I wrote that piece and at the time when I reflected, it was hard. It was difficult. John, my whole identity was caught up in that thing.
It was you.
I was personal branding before personal branding is a thing. And I don't want to pull a page out of 1928, but sorry, John.
That's it.
Sorry. I think of the original personal branding experts like Sir Richard Branson, love him or hate him, Donald Trump, like the folks that really just built their personal brand. So when I built ICUC, John, I built ICUC and Keith Bilous were really largely one and the same, right? Like I put myself into it, my license plate, everything was that. So when that phone call came, it was okay. And I cried. It took some time to digest it. But as I said, and I say now, I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to lead that organization after I sold it. Very grateful. I had the best in both worlds in many ways, John. I was able to be a founder, an entrepreneur, started a company, sold it, went through that whole experience, then had to put a different hat on and become a CEO in a corporate organization.
But the biggest challenge was to emotionally remove you from all the work you put into that company. And on one phone call, this was not a face-to-face meeting, they said, we don't need you anymore. In fact, we don't want you anymore. Goodbye, have a nice day.
Yeah, well, we're going in a different direction, right? And, respectful of the whole process, right? Respectful of those. We were coming out of pandemic. World was changing. Much was changing at the time in business, in the world. And I have, as difficult as it was, yeah, I know I reflect upon those. I reflect upon the day it happened. Every day, every year that date happens, that time happens, I think about it in my head. I laugh with my wife about it. We kind of, we chuckle now about it, but
yeah.
I then, right. I did a lot of Lego after that phone call, John. Oh man, I crushed the Lego. Dude, I went up to my kid's bedroom and there was like probably 4 or 5 unboxed packages of Lego, like big kits, like 1,000-piece Legos. Man, I was the Lego king for a few months after that phone call.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I'm telling you, I needed to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happened next, Keith?
As I said, I went to Kenya. I said to the kids that I was going to roll my sleeves up and go back to work, became the CEO of my own interests, and came down here into what now is belovedly called the lab, the Business Athlete Performance Lab. We're behind the scenes right now. And before I started the lab, I started a bit, I went down the path of exploring augmented virtual reality. I went down the path of exploring my legacy. And maybe there was a reason for that, John. Maybe by what I had accomplished with my previous business, by maybe my journey to Kenya, by maybe my journey through life. I've had a journey. I've got a blended family now, and I maybe coming back to the world. Because when I say this, John, come back to the world, I left it 9 years ago as I was selling the company, as I was going through my just through some personal things. I didn't like what social media was doing to me. I didn't like what it was doing to my young kids at the time. So there was a moment I was looking in the mirror. My kid was in the back seat, and I remember looking at my son as I was creating some content, and I was reflecting, and I was like, I don't like that. So I stopped, got off it. But I share that with you because we live in a world now where social proof is important. People want to know what you've done, what you've accomplished. So I came back into the world a year ago, John, and I'm like, all right, here I am.
Yeah.
People are like, oh yeah, who are you? I'm like, all right. Yeah, right. Because I've been gone for 8 years. Yeah. Right. People are like, so if you've done all these things, Keith, like, where's your Instagram profile? Where's your Facebook? Where's the LinkedIn? I'm like, I was gone raising my kids and just doing my thing.
Just like
so I shared
all over, right?
It was. It absolutely was.
Yeah.
And it's part of my journey because I built my last business. My entire social network is not in my backyard here in Winnipeg, Canada. My entire social network is on an airplane anywhere in the world. So I'm starting from scratch. I'm starting from scratch socially. I'm starting from scratch business-wise. I did not want to go back into the same industry. I wanted to do something different. And the idea of legacy really intrigued me, John. Right. I had spent some time in Kenya, some life-changing moments with some people down there. And the idea of legacy, and I knew Apple was releasing their Vision Pro this year, which they did. I knew that Meta was on a way to, give away freely their operating system to create the next version of Android, which they did. So I consider myself kind of a futurist. I like to look forward at things. So I started developing in that space. And I developed a product called Legacy Space. And it was a virtual world of your legacy. And it was a place where I was hoping my kids can come and see dad after dad. Well, I don't even know if we're going to pass in the future because there's so much digitization of us happening that the idea of passing on in the future is an interesting discussion, frankly. But the point is, I was working on Legacy Space, John, and it was, I guess, around this time last year, or early, maybe last April or so, where I realized that I had bitten off more than I can chew. I was trying to climb Mount Everest when I needed to maybe just think about climbing Mount Picchu or Mount Kilimanjaro at the time. So I made a pivot. I made an entrepreneurial pivot. I woke up and I'm like, this isn't working. Looking ahead of me going, I'm not confident in the direction where I'm taking this thing right now.
Right.
So I made the decision to make a pivot. And I pivoted towards something that has been part of me for many years. It was part of me as I built the ICUC, and it's part of me since I guess, found myself in life, which was this whole idea of a business athlete. Somebody that takes care of themselves in the gym first. I know we share that commonality. Somebody that looks in their mirror, takes care of their emotional self, physical self, mental self.
Right.
Takes care of that first. Because without that's the foundation. Nothing else matters. I saw a clip with Schwarzenegger last week where people were like, you still work out? And he's like, well, yeah, I still breathe. I still go to bed. I'm like, what do you mean you still breathe? He goes, well, breathing, training, sleeping, that's just part of what I do as a human. Well, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Right. So the business athlete mindset was something that I was really passionate about. So John, I launched the Business Athlete Performance Lab, and I cast it as a wide net, not truly fully knowing what it really was, but it was concepts, it was ideas, it was something to talk about. At the time, fellow I was working with said, Keith, you got to start a podcast. And John, I was struggling, man. Struggled with imposter syndrome, struggled with insecurities. I wasn't the confident soul that I'm speaking to you right now in the camera, looking you in the eyes.
Right.
I was struggling with much of what was going on around me. Because I was still yesterday, right? I was still ICUC guy. Still all of that. Right?
Not
so at all.
Yeah.
So it was suggested that I start a podcast. And I didn't want to do a podcast. I wanted to do something more substantial than that. So I decided to start this daily show. Which we did together, which was Live in the Lab with Keith Bilous. Yeah. And it's I did a daily show. I do it 1:00 Eastern time, do it 7 days a week. Why? To hold myself accountable.
Yeah.
I said to myself, well, I'm alive every single day at 1 Eastern time anyways. So why not have a structured meeting? I'll record it. I'll work on gaining my confidence back, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I showed up one Monday and started my show. And whatever it is, 700 videos later, hundreds of guests later, I've been doing my show every day since. And it was probably 3 months ago, maybe not even, where I finally was able to shed maybe yesterday, and finally be able to be confident with what I am and who I am and what I'm building now. And I'm building the world's biggest talk show on LinkedIn and YouTube. I'm building a conversational platform using social media platform tomorrow. I'm taking what I learned with my business of yesterday and I'm modernizing it for the business of tomorrow. John, media is not dead.
No.
What's dead is the infrastructure that creates it.
The,
You don't need a office tower in New York City with a big transmitter and millions of dollars in rent and millions of dollars of everything else to put on a 4-hour, 3-hour, 2-hour morning show.
no.
No.
It's just the opposite.
Exactly. People still want.
That's where it will be. And that's where it
Yes.
is going.
Yes. So, a couple of months ago, I really fully made, again, maybe not fully made. I would say that the pivot has been complete in my whole idea of imposter syndrome. And I got to tell you, John, I'm very grateful that every single day in the lab, live in the lab with Keith Bilous and mornings in the lab with Keith Bilous, we run Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern time, John, mornings. And every day, 1 o'clock Eastern time, live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and all the platforms. But I'm fortunate to meet an interesting new human being every single day. One Monday,
I
I
had the
sat down.
pleasure of being there and the privilege of being there. How long ago was it? About 3-4 months ago? Or?
It was my pleasure. It was one of my favorite conversations, and I believe we're going to do a second one. We're going to get Schwarzenegger in the lab with us.
I like it. I'm trying to.
I know you are.
Yeah.
Counting on you to bring him in, actually.
Yeah.
But it was a few months ago when I recognized that what I was really good at is conversing, is helping people feel comfortable in this space, is inviting people into my space. I've just reached into what I was raised with and said, you know what, I really want to be good at this and get good at it and get better at it. And every single day I'm grateful to meet incredible human beings. Every single day I go to school for 2 hours. I meet people every single day. And I take those learnings, John, and I apply them to myself every single day.
Yes.
And it has been a wonderful, gracious experience. So now when I wake up, I'm building a modern day media company. Very much like when Ted Turner launched CNN. I'm building a 24/7 conversational chat company that'll be streamed on LinkedIn and YouTube on tomorrow's social platforms with this idea of creating content for conversation. Right. A lot of yesterday's media was talking at us. And then, of course, we introduced comments where, we as human beings were able to comment back to the news article.
Right.
But this idea of introducing a conversation is something I'm pretty passionate about. And it's something that we're going to build the business around.
I love it because obviously I'm also very active in podcasting. Not as frequently as you do. Where do you find your guest, Keith? Because I always found right from the beginning when I started podcasting, and I started about 4 or 5 years ago, first blogging, then on a local basis, and then gradually the circle had to become bigger because although we have a lot of talent here in northern British Columbia, I was thinking about setting up a studio in Vancouver, bigger circle there, and then said, why are we not doing this? We talked about, I had this apartment, why not set up a studio here and do it virtual? And now we probably do 95% or more virtual around the world. The challenge was always from the beginning is that where do we find the guest to, we do about 13 to 15 podcasts a month, and and where I'm the host, and then probably another 8 or 10 where I am a guest. But we work with Podmatch that has worked well for us in terms of identifying guests. How do you, because you need a lot of guests ahead of time, probably, how do you secure your guests?
Hold on, John. There's a squirrel over there again. Can we?
Is he?
Remember?
I saw him too. Yeah,
he is. I'm just distracted by that squirrel that was around.
I know. Me too. Yeah. I saw yours, and I have one here too, right in the corner there.
Yeah, I know. He was on. I do. When we met on our show back live in the lab there back when you sat with me.
Exactly.
He came through our time. Hold on to that squirrel again.
Yeah, there he goes. Can you believe it?
For those that
I
are
guess they're
wondering,
going to say, what the hell is the matter with these guys?
so I'll set it up, John. When John was on my show, John was kind enough to talk about his ADHD, and I laughed about my propensity for probably having the same undiagnosed ADHD. John, there's that squirrel again, man. So we laughed on my show about squirrels and just being distracted. So I had to bring that joke into this show because it'll make everybody want to go back and listen to you and I the first time we talked.
I love it.
I'm good at segueing, my friend. But to answer your question, how am I finding guests? Well, Podmatch has been awesome. I got to tell you, I'm sure you have found the same experience.
Yeah, Alex has done a terrific job.
Absolutely. Podmatch has been great. I use Matchmaker FM as well. Is a platform that I use. But you know where I've been finding a lot of success, John? LinkedIn. So let me share with you my philosophy for how I'm building the business and why. So I'm building my business at the root of LinkedIn. Why? Because it's my POV that when you look at all the social platforms in the world, it's the last one that's not owned by one human. Yeah. So there's some comfort in that, even though it's ran by a board and it's ran by Microsoft. It's not owned by Elon. It's not owned by Zuck. It's not just like one human that has that has the ability to have the control. Maybe it's a control thing for me, but that's interesting to me. Yeah. But the other thing that's interesting to me, John, is that it's probably for the most part the most validated platform that I know that John Brink's a human being and you have a wallet. Yeah. And ultimately, that's what I want. I want to know that you're a real human and you have a wallet. On X, I don't know. Instagram, I do know, I don't know. I don't know. There's still things that can be fooled there. So what I have decided is that LinkedIn is my center point. Okay. Now, once I've learned that John's the real human being and he's got a wallet, I can now go find him on Instagram and other social platforms. But LinkedIn's my start. But I share that with you because I'm very active there. And I'm meeting a lot. I'm networking with people every single day. I stream into the platform every single day. 2 hours. Around the world. I'm ubiquitous in LinkedIn. So it's been, so for example, it's funny, true story. I'm sitting over there in the lab an hour before our show, and I'm frantically stressing about my morning show, putting it together. I'm like, oh, fuck, I got to get this thing put together. I got a bunch of other things to do. Then I get this little alert on my phone that says somebody posted something on LinkedIn that I should pay attention to. I go look at it, and I get involved in this thread. Within seconds, my morning show's planned tomorrow. Because a fellow that I had on my show last week, he's high-profile LinkedIn influencer, brings 100,000 followers with him, makes a post this evening. He's a Beverly Hills guy, makes a post this evening. Within moments, it blows up. I say to him, hey, why don't you come on the show? Let's talk about your post and celebrate it. Yeah. And he's like, I'd love that. So we're going to do it. So what I'm getting at here is I've introduced a segment on my show, John, called Creator Spotlight. Every single morning at the 41-minute mark, I find a creator that I like the work they're doing, typically on LinkedIn. I surface them on my show, and I talk about them. And I create content about them. I then chop it up when the show's over. I surface it on LinkedIn, and I post it. I tag them in it. Typically what happens is I get a nice response saying, oh my God, thank you. You just gave me something. Then they show up in the lab the next day because then it's a pay it forward thing. So if I nominate John comes to the lab the next day. I say, John, you got to nominate a creator for tomorrow. So what starts to happen is this big spiral effect of love starts to happen. And I got guests lined up. So I'm booked for Live in the Lab. I'm booked until middle of June. I think I've got a couple free spots here and there. But the reality too, John, I'd like to think is because I'm sitting with great human beings with like yourself. And listen, John, conversations take two. A good conversation, two people. Yeah. I've been privileged and blessed to meet with great humans, and I think create some great content, which has encouraged others to say, I want to be on that guy's show. Yeah. So people are reaching out saying, I want to be on the show, which has been great. And I got people come back for a second round, a third round. So getting guests, I thought was going to be a thing, is being less and less of a thing. To be honest with you, what's actually turning into a thing is, like, you know how to make a podcast.
Too many.
Too many what?
Too many guests, you say? Too much?
No, I'm just adding hours because my plan is to do a 24-hour day of content, right? So I'll just add an extra hour. So my morning show right now is an hour. I'll add a second hour on it, right? So, I've if there's anything that I've learned, John, since I've come back to this, is that I know how to deliver, create, produce, execute a live show.
Yeah.
Like from soup to nuts. Get a guest, produce the show, distribute the show. So if you said to me, hey, Keith, I want to start a morning show in Prince George. You're in Fort Nelson? Sorry.
Prince George. Yeah.
You're like, hey, Keith, I want to do a morning show in Prince George. I'm going to rock John Brink on the airways from 7 till 8 on YouTube. I can set you up. Like I could give you all the tools. You literally would just have to show up and start talking.
Right.
So, and that's the disruption to typical Western media, right? Where we grew up with morning radio and morning TV shows and, and all that big infrastructure that goes into support it. I had a hypothesis, John. I said, if I create a morning show and put it in front of everybody in the morning where their habits are, will they watch it? Well, the first day, people were like, they didn't show up. Second day, I'm like, hey, I'm here. Third day, people start showing up. And now people are showing up all the time. Why? Because I'm in their habit, because I've become a habit, because I just show up every single morning, right?
Continuity, predictability, you are there, right? That's the key, right?
It is the key. That's how you build trust.
Yeah.
Right? So I've looked at your shows. I looked at your consistency. It's easy to trust a guy like John Brink who constantly shows up, right? You see your story, and then you now see that the guy's still showing up at the ripe age of 23. Like, okay, I need to hear what this guy says.
Exactly. 23, yeah.
Well, I was going to give you 18, but I figured I figured maybe that extra gray hair and that corner over there, John, made you look like you're closer to 23. So I know that you felt like you were 27, but I'm thinking 23.
Yeah, I love it. So as you go forward, you have a model there that fits into Ted Turner, like 24 hours TV. So obviously we agree that what is changing, people interacting is no longer the same as it used to be. And so newspapers are no longer what it used to be. Neither is what we see as television. Half of it is commercials anyway about things that you don't need or want. But then podcasting and models like that, where you have interaction around the world, it's still just at its beginning and will explode as we go forward, where people from around the world are talking together. If I look at even my podcasting, last week I had somebody from China, several people from Europe, from South America, from all over the world. Mm-hmm. And that will become the model that people listen to, because it is interesting and different topics, and whatever model somebody is presenting, that so many people around the world are watching, and it is happening as we speak. Even if I look back a year or 2 years, it is exploding.
Absolutely. I got my dog in here being the squirrel distracting me right now. You are absolutely right. I think where I differ, because I'm betting my cards on the future.
Yeah.
Is I'm betting on live conversation. And let me explain why. While the rest of the world is paying attention to what has already happened, nobody's really paying attention to what's happening around us.
Right.
Let me expand on that. So on Sunday, a massive technological event happened in the world that was disguised as a cultural event. You know what it was?
When was that? Sunday?
It was on Sunday. Yeah. And I'm kind of being jestful with you because I don't expect you to know about it. I'm creating hyperbole with it. But here's the reality. This ancient TV station called Netflix live streamed, hear me clearly now, they live streamed the Tom Brady roast.
Right.
You're thinking, yeah, so what, Keith? I'll tell you what so what is. So Netflix is closer to yesterday's HBO than what Netflix was born as. Why? Because technology has moved it forward. You see, John, back when Netflix was introduced and back when the iPhone was introduced, we weren't streaming content. We needed to download it. We needed to create it, download it to our phone. What was the job? Take 17,000 songs in your pocket. Because the technology to stream wasn't available to us yet. So in order for us to consume that content, we had to take it with us. But now what's happening and what's shifting, so let's pause for a second there. So Netflix was born as well. They're like, okay, take all this content and watch it. Binge watch it. The binge era hooked us on Netflix. But we've all now seen what's happened with Netflix. The days of binge watching are over. They trickle episodes out every week. Oh, it sounds like ABC, CBS, Disney, like the old days. They don't bunch stuff out. They introduced some live programming over the last couple of years to test their capacity to do live programming. They did some live talk shows a few years ago, failed. They did the Love is Blind reunion last year. It did not work technologically. They want to get into the most lucrative part of advertising, which is what? Live content, live sports, live programming. That's where the money is.
Right.
And it's only now where technology is enabling us again to be like yesterday, the days of linear television, which was the broadcast world. So what's also happened with technology shifting, John, is it also affected our cultures, right? So where you and I grew up with watching the same show on Thursday night and talking about it on Friday at the water cooler, we live in a world of microcultures again. I believe we're going to go back to a world of some more macroculture moments because of what Netflix is doing. And I'm going back to Netflix and other streaming platforms. Look at where live sports is going, not to CBS, ABC, or Fox. It's going to Amazon. It's going to Google. It's going to YouTube. Streaming is the future, not recorded podcasts.
No.
The future is live conversation. I built an entire business on communication. The number one app on everybody's phone is a messaging app.
Right.
People want to communicate.
Right. So what you are doing is live podcasting, at the same time allow comments to come in that people can participate in your podcast or your dialogue, and you have everyday podcast.
Yeah, so that's the ambition. The ambition and the desire and the model is built around live conversation. And then chopping that. So, because here's the thing, John. So here's where I would look at what we're doing right now.
Right.
Like, we're recording this anyways. I'm not certain why we're just not streaming this live on YouTube right now.
Right. Because
it helps the YouTube. I don't know why you're not. That's no disrespect to you or your team, but
no.
I actually don't know why we're not, because we're already having this conversation anyways. People are like, well, Keith, do a podcast. I'm like, well, I'm just going to do a live stream because I got to record it anyways. Because then when it's done, I take my content and here's what we're really good at, John. Like my morning show, we wrap the morning show up at the 55-minute mark of the first hour.
Right.
By the top of the hour, that first hour is looped again, running a live loop again. So it's the illusion to the audience is we got 2 hours of live conversation happening. But by the 15-minute mark of that first hour, I've taken my first hour, I've chopped it up. It's now a podcast distributed to the world. People could take it with them if they want. But I'm chopping up clips from my first show, getting it into the social feeds in front of people almost immediately.
Right.
I had a guy. I was having my morning coffee a month ago. 5:30. My show goes on at 7. I saw him in LinkedIn. He says, "Hey, I'm making an announcement today." I sent him a note. I said, "Hey, do you want to come on my show and make your announcement?" He's like, "Sure." So this guy's a couple 100,000 followers. Comes to my show, makes the announcement. The show wasn't even 8 minutes over, and I had his 7-minute clip cut up, captioned, distributed. He looked at me. He's like, "What?" I go, "Yeah." So to me, that's the value. That's what I'm selling. So you're a CEO, John, of a company. You're like, I got a message I got to get out today. I got a narrative I want to get out in front of my stakeholders, in front of my all my constituents. I need to get my message out. And in a world of AI generated content and AI generated messaging and AI generated this and that, I can quickly I'm quickly bringing trust to the table. I'm being Wolf Blitzer. I'm showing up every single day. Right. So now when John Brink comes on my show, like, okay, I want to go sit with Keith. I trust him. He's been on LinkedIn for years now doing his thing. I see him. He's all out there. I have something I want to bring to the public. John's like, "Hey, Keith, yeah? Can I come on your show?" "Sure. When do you want to be on?" "I'll be on next Friday." "Okay, great." You come on and be on my show. You make your announcement. I chop it up and get it distributed almost in real time. Right. It's like a modern day PR, modern day community. It's narrative control, John.
Right.
It's conversation, right? You want to own the narrative. Let's see the narrative from your point of view. And then let's drive the conversation around it.
Right. So what we are doing, just for a guest watching, the evolution of podcasting, if you wish, blogging, started it slowly and gradually, and then all of a sudden, podcasting starting to become more popular. Then the next thing that then happens, you got people like Joe Rogan. Now, he delays, right? Does he? Or his podcast, he's probably the most popular podcaster around the world.
100%. Yes. He's a very successful.
So what does he do in his model? I'm not sure about that. Does he delay, or is it live?
So he's a recorded podcast. He does not do it live. He does a recorded show.
Right. So how far delayed would that be?
Like, you talking about a
week? Yes. Sorry, Keith. Sometimes what happens with me is that I'm being hosted by a podcast. We do about 8 or 10 of them a month, and then sometimes I ask, not always, but sometimes I ask, when will you release the podcast? Yes. They say, well, in about 4 to 6 weeks. I said, "Are you kidding me?" I don't say that, but I think that. Yeah. What we do is we are within 24 hours. This podcast that we have, will be released tomorrow morning, our time, or within probably 12 hours. So we are not quite live, but obviously it crossed our minds from time to time. Is that the most effective model as we go forward? Not many people do, for whatever reason. Virtually in all the podcasts that I've done, I think you're number 250 or 249 or so, but I don't think we ever have changed, and the whole time that we have done it, we have never edited anything out of the podcast other than we were thinking at one point about it because we had an earthquake and the whole building started shaking here. And I said, "Oh my God," I didn't swear, but in any event, I said, "Oh my God." And then we said, "No, we leave it in there." So we did that. So it's not from an editing perspective that we don't, but we are hearing you, and you were one of the first ones that I've had interaction with speaking about this type of a model, and obviously it got my attention that you were live, and as you were, questions were asked, or it left the door open for interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where I'm very much finding action, John, on my live show is in the morning, and I expected it. Because like I said, I had that hypothesis that people have habits. Humans wake up in the morning and either turn the radio on, turn the TV on, put their phone on, check their socials, but they want to connect.
But the morning, is that your morning, Keith? Depending where you are, or are you interacting around the world? Or I find sometimes the challenge is a little bit. I have people from Australia. They are nearly a day ahead of us or time, and then the next thing somebody from China, then somebody from Athens, Greece, or Spain. So you know the point, right?
I do. So when I'm speaking mornings, I'm speaking North American mornings. There's no question. However, our audience is like I got a bunch of people from Germany and Argentina and so forth tuning in, and it's their afternoon. Excuse me, it's their afternoon, but it's a fun, lighthearted show the mornings, and there's. I'm going to suggest because of the predictability. It's if somebody had a choice in the morning to turn a recorded podcast on or to be a part of a live conversation, I'm going to suggest to you 9.9 out of 10 people are going to put the live conversation on.
Right.
Because they know it's live, they know it's there, you get to know the audience, you get to know the hosts, and yes, that can happen with podcasts, but again, you think about a podcast, it's there's some friction involved. You got to find one you like, and then if you like it, hopefully it's downloaded there, hopefully it's there at 6 o'clock in the morning, like hopefully all those things match up for you, or I take the guesswork out of it for you. Your alarm set for 6, there's Keith, and he's there every day.
Yeah.
It becomes very predictable. Right.
Exactly.
And I guess what I go back to, like what we're doing right now is so I will be frank, we have been playing with our post-production model, actually. So I think when you and I met and did our show, I think I was on my first iteration of that model. Right. Then iterated again, and I'm going through another iteration right now. And it's not about editing out the guests or the content. It's that I'm creating a show. And I'm noticing that my audience largely likes to consume it in the evening, like late night television. So I've been making some fun stuff around like commercials and things around that. Right. So we aim for a week later from recording, from live to tape. Again, if you think about this, so let's go back to when you and I were growing up watching TV. Right. So Letterman live to tape. Like Letterman shot at 5:30 Monday to Friday, and then it ran at 11:30 that night. Yeah. Right. So I'm largely doing the same thing. I'm doing live to tape, and then I'm releasing it as a podcast later. Right. So I'm at a point now with a lot of these AI tools where I could release content within the next 24 hours, but I'm trying to add some show edits to it around my monologue and some graphics that may be taking a little longer because I'm trying to deliver a different product per se. But I don't know. If I'm taking an hour to do it, I might as well stream it live and then do it in post quickly, and Bob's your uncle. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is just bouncing this by you is saying that, but I do in my podcast, I have, although I'm, oh shoot, that is did you see it?
Is it there?
The squirrel. Yeah, right there. My God. Anyway, so I'm not only talking about ADHD. It's one of the things we make fun of it, but it's.
I see it in the apartment there. The
ADHD. I know. And then I've been an entrepreneur for nearly 70 years because I left school when I was 13, and so I talk about entrepreneurship, business. I talk about all the topics that I've had encountered over the years, and we have guests that are from all different areas on all different topics, whatever is going on in the world, and all of that is open. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is create a dialogue about that, having, very, luckily enough, very interesting guests, usually, and so that's kind of my model in a way, and then continuity, because we're always there, and then mainly working with Pod Match, but also keeping an eye on other opportunities, accessing interesting people, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, for one, who's still, he's still not responding to me, and I send him a book and everything, but anyway, I'll be there. But in any event, so it's still an evolving vehicle platform But
Yes.
it's a changing world, and it's still at the very beginning and evolving as we speak.
Well, if it's certainly evolving to video, right? Like, there's no question that video is I know I have many podcaster friends, and listen, I'm not anti-podcaster. I'm a marketer. That's what I joke about with my friends. Like, I'm a marketing guy.
Right.
And as a marketing guy, I have to sell against what I'm not, which is I'm not a podcaster. So I'm like, poo podcasts. And the reality is I do a podcast. I do a podcast disguised as a show. Let's just call it what it is, right? But the truth of the matter is that if you're not embracing video, and I love your setup, I love what I see there. Your suite there, your studio. If you're not embracing video, you're going to get left behind in this space.
Yeah.
It's just it, and I don't even know, John, if the word podcast is the word we're using in the future, because it's an idea that's dated. It's just it's what we're doing. We're actually we're watching TV.
Yeah.
It's like it's
more or less. Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like, I know I'm on a TV in your studio right now, so you're still watching the TV. We're so caught up as humans with exactly. I could see it. We're so caught up with labels and calling something, right? Which is, no, hold on. I'm consuming content. It's just coming through streaming on the internet instead of linear on a broadcast transmission tower, right? And it's still content that me as a human is consuming.
Yeah. So as you look forward, Keith, in terms of the evolving things, may it be, I'm an author, you are too, I believe, and then obviously podcasting, call it that, and all those kind of things that are happening. AI has influence on us as we go forward, and so what will it all look like, and where should we go from here, other than already you have found, I believe, an very interesting niche that is relatively new but very successful. What else will happen next? I believe newspapers are slowly disappearing because the news is too old. By the time you pick up that newspaper and read it, by and large, it will not have the influence that it had before, and that's already the case. A lot of the typical newscast or television shows and newscast are not as popular as it used to be, and to a certain extent disappearing, of listening to talking heads that have a bias in one direction or the other. Is where do you find interesting dialogue like we have on our shows, you on yours, me on mine, from around the world on different topics that are recent in a lot of cases, but is in a lot of people's attention right now, is well-being, meaning health and fitness and other things related to the medical condition that involves all of us as to longevity and quality of life issues, and in regards to a changing world, as to what will it look like, and we can have the discussion tomorrow or the next day with somebody out of Spain, somebody from China for that matter, or from South America, or wherever they may be.
Yeah.
Is that the model? Is that where we are going here?
It's interesting because I was having this conversation with somebody to some extent today, John, and it's just this idea I touched upon a few moments ago around microcultures, micro communities, right? Like John's community. Like, there is, pick a random number. There's 1 million people out there. Well, there's actually 140,000 subscribers on your YouTube. Like, there's 1 million people out there that'll drink John's Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Believe in what you're saying, right? So you start thinking about, if there are there 1,000 John Brinks out there that can each lead 1 million people. Now, you know what I mean? So that when you think about yesterday's media, I'll weave this back to my comment. So yeah, the talking heads were sitting there. They worked for a big corporation, but they were still just a human being delivering content, right? We're still getting news from a talking head. It's just not a talking head that is perhaps the part of a larger corporate entity with a lot of different interests. I find it striking when you said just moments ago that the newspaper is dead because it's dated material. Isn't that a podcast?
Potentially, yeah.
Right? You record it, it sits on the shelf. So you go live. Like I was on my show when Kate Middleton was diagnosed. I broke news on my show from London that Kate Middleton had cancer. Whatever. So I'm adding some jests to our conversation. Point is that
I like that, Keith. Yeah.
And it was happening live, and I broke it.
Yeah. We are as close to live as you can get in podcasting, likely, because most people don't do it as quickly. We probably do it most of the times within 12 hours. So, and then, but, the last time we had the conversation, when we talked about that, I found it got my attention. Talking about live, it got my attention with having feedback coming in while you were podcasting and responding to it in an interesting way. So, but whatever it looks like, it's going to change what used to be the status quo. That already is no longer there. So it then becomes a question, what is it? What will it look like? It will be this format, because even when we decided to go virtual, we're up to that point. I have two couches sitting in, and my guest was here and I was sitting there, and that's what we were doing. And and then it was COVID that said, well, we can't do that anymore. So, and then doing the television here with a television station here on the Shaw, we couldn't do that anymore because the studio could. So we said, what do we do now? And so, well, we have this apartment, well, let's turn it into a studio, and then we'll do the same, do the talking, and then, well, then our circle, we don't find enough people here, although there are a lot of interesting people. Maybe go to Vancouver, but then how about virtual? Because television now had gone to the point where before, if you watch television, there were hiccups. As soon as they brought other people in, then either that didn't quite work, or they talked over each other. It didn't work. Now you can have one in Europe, one in Asia, and one in North America or Canada, whatever, all on the same screen, and there is, so it is working, and all of a sudden that became the vehicle, because as you and me are sitting here now having this discussion, we already know that tens of thousands of people will be watching us. I know that, and I'm not trying to blow our own horns, but that is the case. And I can be a speaker, I can be a keynote speaker, which I do, but anytime I make a keynote presentation, either somewhere in Canada or in the United States, it takes me 2 days to fly there, come back, and then have a couple of hundred, or sometimes a lot more than that. So, but here, I'm sitting here, it feels like you are right in the room with me. And at the same time, although in our case, nearly, not quite live, but within 12 hours, then we get the exposure. But it has my interest in terms of life, and I'm with you in terms of that may well become. Maybe all of this is still evolving as we speak, and if it is called podcasting or something else then, but this mode of interaction will become the future. There's no question in my mind.
Allow me to offer this to you, John. Give you a little hack for you.
Okay.
So if we were doing this live right now, like actually live, and obviously being recorded. So when you're going live, it's still being recorded for your podcast, right? So
right.
We aren't going to disrupt your workflow. You're still delivering your podcast tomorrow. Well, let's pretend we're going live right now. So while you're live right now, you're streaming into LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Instagram, Twitch. Plus, we have the ability to stream this conversation into Keith's Instagram, Keith's Twitch, Keith's YouTube, Keith's LinkedIn. So all of a sudden this conversation in John Brink's message is doing this. And then 12 hours from now, when you guys chop it up and do your clean little edits, you then release it tomorrow as your podcast, you're getting a double hit. That's why I'm puzzled why more people aren't adopting what I'm doing. And that's fine. There's a lot of room for me to do the live thing. But when I stream into LinkedIn every single day, I'm the only person doing it.
Yeah.
So if you and I, when we did our live show together, I was streaming into LinkedIn. They just turned it on over the last couple of months. You now have the ability to stream to your profile. So now I'm taking your reach, my reach, and doubling the reach. So there's the magic to my guests too, right? So my guests come on in the morning, they stream out to their platforms. So you want to talk about my networking and my ability to get reach? It's growing rapidly because I'm not only streaming to my platforms, but I'm streaming to all my guest platforms as well.
Right.
And then it's being distributed with a podcast the next day.
Right.
So it just seems like a no-brainer to me from a business perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Keith. It's amazing. And again, like you were saying, is that most people are, I find, that if you podcast and it takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in some cases, or I asked somebody and saying, well, when will this be shown? They said, let me see, June the 20th. I said, really? But say, okay, but we ask ourselves the question frequently, even now, as to where do we go from here? And what will it look like? So we do that frequently, at least in my mind, because that's who I am. And saying...
allow me to answer that for you. I ask myself the same question, John. Now, you have many more years of wisdom over me, so you probably have a more thoughtful response than I do. But when I look back to the history, John, and I look to the future, I think a lot of it is the same. It's people wanting to communicate, right? Which is being delivered in different mechanisms, right? So I know if you've played with the Apple Vision Pro or the Meta headsets, tomorrow's conversations are going to happen in simulated environments, but we're still going to talk. And people still want to hear experiences from a fellow named John Brink coming to Canada with $23.47. People still want to hear the experiences of Keith Bilous doing his thing. And they still want to hear how these two young men get off with conversation. That damn squirrel over there again. Sorry. I know. They still want to get it. So I think whether it's because I've been asking myself the same question, John, as I'm building a business. And I've arrived at this answer. We're still going to be having this conversation in 3 years from now. So if I'm dealing in a world of absolutes, YouTube's still going to be around in 3 years from now. LinkedIn's going to be around in 3 years from now. Instagram's going to be around in 3 years from now.
No question.
So if I show up every single day and create content for those three platforms over the next 3 years, I think I can outlast 99% of everybody else.
So what you're doing, in fact, is you're live podcasting and you're sending it directly live on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or whatever other platforms. And then in addition to that, you release it like a podcast later.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And that may well be 12 hours, 25, whatever it is.
It's exactly it. Yep. So for example, the conversation I had with Brandon Barnum yesterday, it was a live show at 1 o'clock Eastern time. It's being published tonight at 8 o'clock. Yeah. As a podcast. And then my morning show. And then my morning show, John, we go live from 7 a.m. Central Time until 8 a.m. Central Time.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a podcast on demand at shortly a few minutes after the show's over.
Right. And then your guest count has grown remarkable from the time you first started it, and all of a sudden people saw the continuity, interesting guests that you got from all over, and is now still growing.
Yes. There's no question that there's no question that we have momentum. I believe that I'm putting out a different product. I know I am. I can confidently say that I am. People come on my show like, "Oh, this is a different product." It is. It's a different product. It is a highly produced live talk show that's just getting it started. I got big visions for it. But it is people are finding us. We're getting great guests, and we're getting more great guests. And I had a great guest last week who's leading to other great ones, right? Not just how it works. You know how it works, right? Because in the early days, people are like, who's John Brink? But now they're like, oh, this guy's all around.
And then the other part is Joe Peterson from wherever is producing this product, and he's trying to get it in front of people, is saying, hey Keith, I got this product, it's a great product, what can I do to get on your show to make the announcement? Because it's a major announcement that that opportunity, and then you develop that reputation that not for everything, but if you have something of quality, then it may be of interest to Keith.
Yes.
In his
it happened today, John, on my show. I had a guest on my show today that said, Keith, I got news to break here today. I'm like, oh, he's like, look at you, man. Twice in a week, you're getting news to break. I had a guy last Friday break news on my show. And I take pride in that, frankly, because I'm striving to create a safe space for humans to be vulnerable, share what they want to share. We can talk about it. But most importantly, I want to create a space where it's your narrative, right? It's John's message, not Keith's, it's John's message. I'm going to help you get it out there. And then I'm going to fanboy over it for you. But I don't have a political point of view on it, right? I stand on, listen, I got a red shirt on, but I got blue underwear on. So you can call me what you want. I'm
the same as you.
I know you are. I'm a fan of humans, but I love making money.
Yeah, so, and that's part of it as well, right?
Right.
Keith, again, an amazing podcast, and let's make sure, again, we stay in touch, and and as I said to you earlier, this one will come out tomorrow morning for you and your guest, and again, exploring where do we go from here. I want to make sure that we stay in touch. And 4, 5, 6 months from now, again, I'm going to mention it to Scott to make sure that we stay in contact. We're going to follow you on the different media, and it's amazing. It's a changing world. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, and John, the invite is open for you. I know you are a very successful business person, author, speaker, businesses, a bright, spry young man. I think probably on some new training programs. I have a platform for you every single morning throughout the week. I know it's early for you, but you're probably up anyways. You come join me. Come bring your coffee. Come co-host the show. Come break some news. Come talk about your book. My door is open always for you, John Brink.
I love it, Keith. Thank you again. It was a privilege as always. And my friend, all the best to you, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks so much, John. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you.